It's spoiler in time, folks. The show where we take all the hard work we do on Cordkillers understanding how to watch things, watch them, and then get to talk about them with each other. This week, we are going to spoil Joker, the movie, The Larry Sanders Show, episodes 1 and 2 of season 1, Mr. Robot, The Return with season 4, episode 1, The Righteous Gemstones, episode 1, season 8, and a bit about The Good Place, season 4, episode 2. I'm Tom Merritt. He is Brian Brushwood.
Yeah, but before we do that, we have to do the formality of introducing our first update for the Winter Movie Draft.
Well, Brian, what you think of it aside, I couldn't ask for better receipts. If it's all about the money, this is even a bit above what I expected for the opening week of Joker at $93.5 million.
No, there was a brief moment that I was worried that obviously Joker has tremendous cultural cachet in brand value, but the fact that they aimed to such a strange place, uncharted waters when it comes to a comic book movie, I was worried that it would kind of end up in the indie quagmire despite being a DC property and a rated R one to boot, but instead crushed it. It blew last year's Venom out of the water. Congratulations on that. I think that was a win you absolutely needed to have a chance at the brass ring.
It may or may not have legs because of the controversy around it. I don't know. But right now it looks really promising. And next week is an assault. We've got John Teasdale with Jexy. We've got Movie League Mike with both Parasite, the Korean Oscar buzz movie, and The Addams Family. And Brian, you've got Gemini Man coming out next week.
Watching Joker, seeing that Joker box office blow up, just made me realize I've lost so hard. Gemini Man is going to be such a forgettable, middling box office. I think Will Smith's biggest draw days are behind him.
And, all right, let it come out. We'll talk next week. We'll see. Maybe you'll be surprised.
Hopefully.
All right, let's get into talking about The Good Place, which I know you've only partially seen.
Well, by the way, testament to how much television that we queued up for ourselves, right? I just couldn't get to it all, and I ran out of time with like 7 minutes left of the episode. I'm going to go out on a limb and say that I didn't miss much, question mark.
I'll just be honest, I don't remember how it ended.
I got as far as them trying to go back, and this was not a good indicator. Oh my gosh, I have a crazy idea. Why don't we do what we did the very first episode? And I was like, is this what we're going to do? Is this quite literally going to be a whole season of a repeat of everything we've watched so far?
I will say, doing that reminded me why we were doing this at all. Like, oh, right, we're trying to make bad people good. I've completely forgotten that was the bit.
That our team was originally bad people.
Yeah.
The thrust of this was Eleanor wanting to quit because she didn't think she was good at it, and everybody else wanting her to quit because they didn't think she was good at it. And then the architect, Michael, finally revealing that maybe he didn't have a breakdown, but did it on purpose because she is the girl from Arizona, and only she could bring all these people together, which just fell super flat for me.
I thought that was fine because I didn't like
it felt so retconned to me.
Yes, it's totally retconned, but it's fixing something that was previously broken. Him melting down made no sense.
Yeah, I suppose that's true.
At least they proposed a reason for it.
I will take that as a positive out of this. But in the end, even though I can't remember the end, I'm glad we're finally at the point where we're done messing around with getting started. And it sounds like next week we'll get started. Now, I agree with you, Brian. If we just end up seeing beat for beat repeat of the first season, that won't be interesting. But I actually really doubt that that's what we'll see. I think they're going to surprise us. And I mean, goodness, I hope so.
I'll say this much. In the alternate universe where we're not talking about it on Spoiler in Time, those first 2 episodes of the fourth season would trigger my, you know what, maybe this is a binge later kind of thing, or a binge at the end of the season thing. And I probably would not be keeping up week over week based on how soft the first 2 episodes were. Because
that's what happened to me. I watched The Good Place at the beginning.
Yep.
And after the first several episodes was like, you know what, maybe this is a binge. And then I didn't watch it until after the first season was over and people said, I can't tell you why, but you need to go back and watch it. You're so close to where it gets really good. So maybe it really is happening again, where we just have to suffer through a couple more episodes and then we get the twist that makes it really good.
Yep.
I'll say one last thing. We found this out, or we I don't know, uncovered this last week, that these 2 episodes were written as a part 1 and part 2. And I felt these were this was the least necessary way to format this story. It felt like way too much for 2 episodes across 2 weeks. They could have gotten it all in one.
It does, if it was all written as one episode, the one thing that definitely makes sense is why they would spend nearly half the first episode recapping everything so far. Because if it's only the first 20-25%, then, and I think we mentioned that last week as well.
Yeah. All right, let's move on to the Righteous Gemstones, which surprised me in going places that delighted and entertained me in an episode I kind of felt would just be a ramp down toward to set up whatever the end game was going to be for the last couple episodes of the season. But instead, I really enjoyed the chickening out at sticking up for Gideon at the moment when his mom is mad at him, but then the horribly awkward and, even if meant well, entirely wrong way to be honest by the Danny McBride gemstone.
I loved that part. That was the star of the show. Danny McBride crushed it. Gideon's character crushed it. It's interesting because it sort of changes how I perceive the first episode, because there were 2 things that I perceived. Number one, I pictured the blackmail party tape being much worse than it was. That expansion of everything to say, okay, so one dude cheated and everyone else, did drugs and cheered. For some reason, that sounds less bad. but also her visceral reaction to having been lied to totally negates my original impression that there was kind of an unspoken, I'm looking the other way thing. Unfortunately, a lot of what I loved about the very first episode, the fact that it earned the laughs by being deadly serious, was completely undermined by this episode. There was way too much madcap for my taste. I thought the opening scene with Baby Billy was so cliche. I hated it. It was
a weird coincidence that
it was too many coincidences. Are we in Star Wars prequels mode where it's a small universe after all, and the moment someone gets away, they're going to bump into someone else?
You guys are thinking too much about it. It was fun. It was in character. It was perfectly enjoyable for me.
Well, and keep in mind, I don't have any better ideas. I do love the idea that they wrapped it up with Scotty. Like, okay, the story ends with Scotty getting away and the family coming together. Great. Let's get rid of Scotty. Get him out.
Baby Billy being the agent of that, Baby Billy having the entire gemstone vault money. I love that. Yeah. I'm like, this is great. Now Baby Billy has exactly what he needs to be the worst version of Baby Billy he can be.
And I agree with you. I absolutely love where we ended up. I hated how we got there. I thought how we got there, it was too madcap for my taste. But again, this is coming from a guy who didn't have any better ideas. All I know is I'm happy with where we are now.
But I think the best scene in this episode was
shot
all
in the butt?
that. No. Was all the madcap stuff with Judy in the drugstore and in the parking lot.
I thought dumb. It doesn't add anything to the plot, but it was hilarious.
I sent these guys a clip of the video of him doing that earring reveal, as if he was like the coolest guy on earth. And I broke that and watched that scene like 10 times because it was so perfectly shot.
Like beating up the car with the shopping carts and ended up in jail felt dumb. It just felt dumb to me and unimportant.
But again,
it's symbolic. It's symbolic. I mean, the blackmail, the murder, and yet Judy is the only one getting any punishment for this very small crime of messing up a car. Yeah. I think it was an interesting symbolic moment.
Also, I liked, this is another case of, I love where we ended up with everybody on the gemstones at a low moment. But again, on the Judy thing, I didn't really care for how we got there. It seemed a bit madcap. I'm
with you on that one. That madcapness didn't play as well. Although I did think that the conversation in the pharmacy was hilarious. I had some good laughs there. I also loved that Chekhov's gun closet finally played out, and we understood why we had seen her hang up her guns. Even though I'm not sure I believe that she would have actually shot him. I expected it to be like a trank dart.
Yeah,
or something.
because they had that silencer sound on it, and
but
because
then they showed a bloody butt like he'd actually gotten shot.
Oh no, yeah, he definitely actually got shot, but the sound effect made it sound like a trank. And in fact, I didn't like it because I'm like, there's no way she is literally attempting murder right now.
No,
and then I heard the, and then I was like, oh, it's just a trank dart. This is for self-defense. And then he got up and was actually shot, and then I didn't like that again.
He got shot in the butthole, which I thought was also fun.
I mean, that they wrote that just so he could say that, for sure. Yeah. I haven't got much else to say other than like, yeah, this one was better than I expected. To be honest, it had some good laughs, and wow, it was the perfect thing to watch after Joker to just kind of lighten my mood.
Yeah, a bit. A quick physics side note. Traditionally, if you get T-boned, you don't want to be the T. Yeah, like for some reason, the penetrating bullet is the dude who nearly died, and the two who got slammed right on the side just crawl
when
out.
No one was hurt in Baby Billy's car. I was like, yeah.
I thought he wasn't going to walk away with his Johnson. I thought that was going to be.
I thought that was going to be the bit.
I was waiting for that too. Like he walked out of the car with his pants zipped up. They didn't even. And I think this might be. No.
It's a dream. Are you saying it's a dream?
No,
it was. I was going to say this might have been the first episode without a penis in it, but no, we saw it in the playback of the video.
Oh, that's right.
So.
We got a double. We got the extended remix of the gray testicles of Chad.
Mm-hmm. Right. All right, let's move on to Mr. Robot, the season premiere, which kind of like The Good Place takes us back to a very similar situation for the first season of Mr. Robot. We see Elliot on a laptop bringing down someone powerful for an alternate reason, except in this case, it's got a whole lot more backstory because he's trying to avoid the Dark Army and thwart their beliefs after, by the way, we just saw Angela get taken out. Which that was a good shocking moment where Eileen and I looked at each other and like, well, I guess no Angela now. Okay.
There was a great trick they played because, and I've never seen this in a TV show before, they seamlessly went from previously on to current time.
So good.
Yeah.
Did you notice? I've
seen that happen before, but I haven't seen it so well done where I was suddenly like, wait a minute, this is new.
Well, and I was thinking like, well, at what point did it switch over? So I must have spent like 4 or 5 times just going back over it. And there's definitely, I forget the old guy's name, but he definitely has, almost a buzz cut short hair or whatever. And then even though he's dressed in the same thing, suddenly he has like 4 weeks of growth on his hair. Like they got close, but not exactly. Like go back if you have a DVR and watch that moment. It's pretty fun when you find it.
Also just great. Camera and cinematography choices.
This was written and directed by Sam Esmail, and you could tell the Sam Esmail episodes. That dude knows how to do visuals.
But there's like a very silent choreography in that scene in the yard because you don't realize it until it's over. But the reason Angela stands up and turns, which you would think is towards Price. It's her looking and seeing the agents of the Dark Army. That's why she stops and sits back down. It
was so crazy jarring. Because I'm like, why is she just standing there transfixed? But she's kind of crazy. So you're like, is she seeing something or is she just weird?
I totally missed that.
You don't know for sure.
I totally missed that. That's great. Although, because my experience, because I did not notice that she saw the Dark Army agents, I thought she was just losing her mind. And to me, Price seemed like he was overreacting when he was getting busted into tears. And then for me, it was a reveal that there was a live wire on him and that just the speaking of her intention to take down White Rose was the damning incident.
Most of the rest of the episode is Elliot and his alter ego, Mr. Robot / Dad.
I love the partnership of Mr. Robot and Elliot, and I love the theatrical conceit where it's like they're stepping forward. Like it reminded me, minor spoiler, of elements of The Dark Tower when Roland would come forward, and that was so much fun. Like this is more a Mr. Robot part of the job, and this is more an Elliot part of the job.
Yeah. Also, pretty great. I knew, they're not killing Elliot, right? He's going to get out of it.
Oh, I actually didn't because Sam Esmail, in a show that has credibly proven that they're willing to do literally anything, I completely could imagine it's the 4th season. Maybe they literally kill him, and there's some kind of head version of
everyone except for Brian knows that Elliot is not going to die.
But they went to a lot of depth, or a lot of like even the USA logo. They made it fade away right as the Sam Esmail directed,
Yeah.
like they do when the show's
almost
over.
like I was going to say that next.
But it was great. I mean, that
point
was a
being
good
is they
sell.
played it out so far, even though he can't. Like, it's Elliot. How are you going to take away Elliot? That they make it seem final. To your point, Bryce.
Yeah.
And they have, just to put a cherry on it, they have Sam Esmail deliver the hypodermic needle and say, "Goodbye, friend."
Yeah.
Because I'm Sam Esmail, the person who created you as the writer of the show.
I did not know that was him. I didn't know that was him.
I didn't know either until
Wow.
they reveal it in the next week on, which I only watched the first few seconds of and then instantly turned off because I don't watch those.
I think the big surprise, even if you weren't sure, like even if you're like, oh, they're never going to kill him off, the big surprise was that they would revive him. It would be the exact same people reviving Elliot. That was weird.
Wait, was it the exact same people? I got the impression, like, I suspect...
Then next week
I
on
think-
spoiler, I'm pretty sure it was them who saved him.
Okay, well, because it occurred to me, like, if they come in and revive him, there's two things. It could be White Rose saying, "This is a credible threat. You do you believe me now that we will kill you and we could defeat you?"
That's what I took from it. Yeah.
Or if it is a different set of teams, then it is Price deciding to get revenge on White Rose and actually breaking away after the murder of Angela and waiting, knowing the plan is to kill Elliot. Wait till they're gone. All right, let's get in. Now he's our asset. White Rose thinks he's dead, and now we lead a revolution from within.
Oh, interesting.
That's the way I read that.
I think I just saw
it go that way.
I think I just saw a shot, not a spoilery shot, but them in that same place, and it's them talking to Elliot.
Well, we do see Elliot come back to life, so
Yeah.
Right, but I think to Bryce's point, it does matter whether the two gentlemen next to Price were the same gentleman that put him down, or different gentlemen.
Yeah. What did you guys think of the
that's a good point.
honeypot? The honeypot apartment. That
Loved
was
it.
great.
I thought it was great. I like the fact that.
As soon as they opened the door, I was like, "This isn't right." And part of me was like, Elliot should know better. You not let that door close behind you, and he let it close behind him, and then he was locked in, and I was like, "Yeah, this is." It was almost Twin Peaksy. It was almost David Lynchian the way they had that set up with the guy talking on FaceTime and the other guy eating cereal and playing the music,
Don't worry,
like
be
deciding.
happy, or-
Yeah, so creepy.
Did you see the little face in the bookshelf out of the objects?
The what?
don't think
Anybody? So like when that shot of them coming in and you're looking at the front door, there's a bookshelf on the left, and the way that the objects are arranged on the bookshelf, it makes a face. There's like
Looks
eyes
like a
and
face.
nose and a mouth.
No, I didn't see
That's
that.
interesting.
That's weird.
Hey, pretty wild that two of the shows we watched this week just were like, "That's dead weight. Get out of here."
Yeah, bye.
And to be honest, I think
don't-
that's what they need to do to simplify the story. And I think, they solved a problem, because last season we were speculating from the stuff that White Rose was saying that maybe we're looking at, an alternate timeline, time travel, some kind of multiple sci-fi things. They seemed to close the door on all of that and say, "Hey, admit it. She got in your head. She told you some crazy stories. Promised your mom would come back. Move on. Oh, you can't move on? Well, great. The story's moving on without you."
Yeah.
Well, I just rewatched
although
season 3.
we
That's
did-
the end of season 3, though. That conversation with Price is in season 3.
Correct, but I mean they
killing
they put a
Wow.
period at the end of the sentence at the beginning of season 4.
But the
I
idea
definitely
is-
finished that sentence. Also, Darlene gave us a little bit of hope that if you're an Angela's not dead, if you want to be like Elvis lives, Angela lives, you could go on the Darlene ride, which I honestly don't believe that's anything. and maybe Sam Esmail is going to pull off a great magic trick there. But I love that they gave us the sort of like, we know some of you don't want Angela to be dead, so here, you can be Darlene. She's crazy and on drugs, but fine.
I hate to be cynical here, but I think what they're doing is just inventing busy work so that Darlene could still be on the show. I didn't see her serve any purpose except for being baggage on this story.
If you're wrong, it wouldn't show yet. Like, we have to show, if we're depending on what they're going to do with Darlene, it might be important to show her as an unreliable narrator who's lost it, who is sort of the counterpoint to Elliot, who used to be the unreliable one, and now he is the one who has his shit together, at least regarding what he thinks his purpose is. How he's going about executing it is a debate between him and himself, of course, but he is focused. He's not on drugs, and Darlene is. So there's a nice little mirror there, I think.
One last thing, man. I dug Mr. Robot talking to us directly, like, all right, well, look, he's not going to do it. I'll do it. Let's go.
Yeah, that was nice. I like that too.
Dom also finishing off the episode with the taxidermist.
Yeah.
That went from like quaint and like awkward to very threatening in the way that it was intended.
You don't let the contractor in. That was a really dumb move on her mom's part. All right. Anything else on Mr. Robot?
No, outside of, man, it's hard to watch stuff and try to remember stuff from years and years and years ago in a final season. I suspect this is one that would have fewer itches in the back of my mind if I binged it all at once. Sure. But it's hard for me to remember which threads are still alive and which ones were wrapped up. But I do like that the beginning of this, they're like, forget everything. All you got to know is it's Mr. Robot and Elliot versus the Dark Army. All right. And, don't think about why they're the ones that caused the whole mess that they're trying to fix now. Or I like that they're simplifying things.
Let's move on to the Larry Sanders Show, which is the whole library show where we always watch a show that's just available on demand and has completed its run. So we always have at least one thing to talk about no matter what. And with the Larry Sanders Show being a half hour and having so many episodes in its long run, we're doing 2 at a time. This week we did Garden Weasel, which is the pilot and premiere of the show, and David Spade, which revolves around a very young and hilariously unself-confident in his presentation, David Spade. I found that charming.
Oh, that's right. He did have kind of a gee shucks, Mr. stuff, which is not anything I think of with David Spade.
And I think you find out by the end of the show that he is putting that on for Larry Sanders because, David Spade, I'm like, is this just because he's so young that they're presenting him this way? But I guess it was more of a plot point than that. Because David Spade, if you know David Spade, is usually in your face and arrogant.
This is my first time watching all of Larry Sanders. I think I'd seen maybe an episode or two. I think had I been watching it, I would have been, early 20s or something when this came out. I think I would have liked it okay, but as a much more experienced, I wouldn't call myself an experienced veteran, but as somebody who is more experienced in the realities of production and of interpersonal conflict and of what it means to put stuff aside and do the freaking show that you have to do night after night after night. Oh my God, do I love the Larry Sanders Show. And I think it helps that I watched the Zen Diaries of Gary Shandling beforehand. It looks so different to my eyes. I see the detail of the production and the set design. And I'm like, oh yeah, we could make one of those. And that is a way to solve that. That is how Hollywood does X, Y, and Z. I really had a hard time stopping after just 2 episodes.
That's great. I'm so glad because I wasn't sure how it was going to appeal to you off the start because there are parts of it that are dated, and it's 4:3 and, the production value is not what it would be if they did this today. But it also has some nice nostalgia play with the names that they throw out as being the guests and the things that are important in that era of entertainment, which is 1992.
Holy cow, 1992, I was 17 years old. There's no way I possibly could have gotten half of the stuff that they were putting out there back then.
Yeah, it's pretty great. I love that they always have 2 guests. One is a guest they show on the show that is a real actor who's appearing in things. Honestly, I'm totally spaced on the woman who is sitting on the set at the very beginning. She was in an actual miniseries that they mentioned in the Larry Sanders Show at the time. She didn't really go on to become a bigger star than that. But then you also get the main character one with David Spade. This episode called The Promise.
That whole through line of where does your artistic integrity end, and when are you shilling, and when do you sell out? And of course, they very quickly introduce Hank as the complete sellout that's ruined his own, in some ways, his own career. Loved all of that. You know, we have been playful, stop me if you've heard this before, with sponsors before. So seeing the whole bit of like, no, that crossed a line. You're like, oh, I thought it was funny. I thought we were getting the point across.
Oh yeah, the whole garden weasel thing is hilarious.
The garden weasel reminded me of there was a time that I worked for a network on a comedy show, and we were playful with sponsors, and we thought we were being funny. That all landed for me.
Wait till they bring out the garden dragon next episode. This is great. I'm excited. We will continue to watch with 103 and 104 next week. We do need to get to Joker. Anything else about Larry Sanders?
No. Let's jump right into it. I know you got a full schedule, and we got a lot to say about Joker.
Yeah, man. So my one-word reviews are things that I know a few people anticipate and they like to see on Twitter. And there's even somebody created a spreadsheet of all of them. I like them because they are unbidden words that come into my mind when I watch a movie. So I come out of a movie thinking that was good. Oh, that was fine. And so I turn them into a scale. I will not be posting my one-word review of Joker because there's so much attention on this movie and so many extreme opinions about it and so many people feeling like if you don't agree with them, you are so wrong, that putting a one-word review out there just seems like inviting trouble because everyone will put whatever interpretation they want on it, and I will hear from all the people who put a negative interpretation. But my one-word review from this would be amazing. Because it is not enjoyable, but it is, I think, a very well put together story.
And that is your highest on the 5 words?
No, mind blowing is my highest.
Yeah, I don't know what I'd have to think.
This is not to say I enjoyed it. This is not to say I had a good time. This is a challenging movie. Not everyone should see it. It is not a movie that everyone is going to enjoy and that most people will enjoy. This is, in many ways, the kind of film I believe if it didn't have a DC storyline in it at all, if it was just about a guy going through this, would be an art film that you'd see at landmark theaters. It would be having Oscar buzz, and most people wouldn't go and see it. Yep,
I agree. Do you remember when we did the review for Once Upon a Time in Hollywood and you talked about how much you loved the 1960s recreation, the nostalgia, and it had woken all these feelings in you, and I just wasn't feeling it or whatever? I now know what you meant by all of that because I felt it so powerfully from frame one. Everything from the credits to the music to the recreation of Gotham as you know, it looked like it was the Blues Brothers. It looked like it was
1981 New York. Yeah, absolutely.
I believed. And again, if you didn't grow up in that time, I don't expect anyone to get the waves of, oh my God, I'm time traveling right now that I happen to get because I just happen to live in that period. But it was like time travel, and I remember the sense in the films of that era being a kid afraid of the city, and legitimately that's where all the crimes happened and everything. The urban jungle and all that, they made me feel that again for Gotham. It was remarkable. We talked about the cinematography. You might ding it on the simplicity of the plot, but or the story, the writing, but I actually suspect that had they punched that up too much, it would have distracted from the exquisite performance of Joaquin Phoenix and the tension. Like, okay, if you know, you could say the Joker is just King of Comedy meets
Taxi
Driver in a DC universe with some Fight Clubs sprinkled in there, and you wouldn't be wrong. But if you know those songs, my guess is you would really enjoy hearing somebody remix all of those songs. And for me, it was ecstasy. It was a perfect DJ set of all of these things that I knew. Like that moment he's playing with the gun and it accidentally goes off. It's like that's his Taxi Driver moment, and a little bit of the machinist in there with his gaunt frame. But that scene on the stairs where he's dancing and coming into his own, seeing him start off at the lowest point where. Me, arms crossed, show beginning like, all right, make me pity the Joker, and damned if they don't pull it off. It was amazing, Tom. It's an amazing piece of art. I
think too that it's fair to think a little less of it because it is very obviously an homage to Taxi Driver. It is very obviously an homage to King of Comedy, but I also think that it was done for me in a way that felt like, oh, okay, we are taking those elements and we are putting them in a new context. Joaquin Phoenix is executing a character who is just sympathetic enough that you don't utterly hate him, but also legitimately not someone you can identify with. I was ready to be like, okay, so they're vilifying mental illness. Well, if you pay close attention, his mental illness is only the laughing. The rest of it is on him. Now, you could also say, well, it's because of society. So there's a wealth gap. And the wealth gap, which I think is a great device because the wealth gap is something that all the political parties have a thought on and address. And it's like, well, maybe it's that. But it's not just that. It's not only that he's poor and doesn't feel like he can go forward. And that's what I liked about the movie is they didn't just say, well, we'll go with this one thing and we'll overemphasize it or glorify it. They leave it where you can still look at Arthur and say, this is your fault. You didn't have to do it this way. And that's a much more complex character than I expected.
Yeah, I thought near the end they implied that maybe the whole has a disease where he laughs at inappropriate thing was a lie that he was told by his mom, and that really he's just evil. And
no, that's a real disease that they mentioned, and that's a thing that happens. And it was the one part of his character that I felt was important to be like, yes, there is something wrong with him, but it's that, and that doesn't excuse all the horrible things that he does.
I don't want to get in the weeds in that too much, but I did adore that scene where they introduced that conceit with that laminated card on there, and the fact that it was clearly a well-worn thing that this is something he'd been through a lot.
That was another part of the cinema verite of if you didn't exist in 1981, I don't think you can realize how real this movie feels. I had people give me cards like that.
Yeah, I was about to say, do you think anybody born after 1990 has been at the mall and had somebody hand them a card that says, I'm a deaf mute, would you please to give me some money? I don't
think that's a thing anymore. I don't know. Yeah.
Yeah, and maybe that would read as like, well, that's super fake, and then I don't know.
And the garbage strike was a real thing in New York that they probably underplayed, to be honest, how bad it was. Like those images are straight out of Taxi Driver, of those streets and the hookers and prostitutes and criminals on the streets. And again, if anything, if there is a criticism, they underplayed it. They didn't show it as bad as they did in movies of the era. Yeah. So I think the setting is incredibly realistic.
Yeah, I suspect that if you portrayed it as bad as it was portrayed previously, you would be accused of like, okay, come on. It's not, you lost me. It's a bit much. I also adored, once you think of it as a remix set, all of a sudden, I can't imagine the movie is as good as it is without Robert De Niro in that pivotal role, knowing that he was in Taxi Driver and King of Comedy, and to see him play, kind of another generation of that story.
The other thing I like about it too is that every character, including Murray, is complex. Murray isn't a cardboard cutout. When they give him that scene where he comes to Arthur, it's not just like, hey, I'm the showbiz guy. it's like, no, I have real concerns. And he tells his agent, like, just settle down, or producer, I guess, settle down. It's okay. Like he's got depth to that character, even in that little bit. And of course, Bob De Niro's amazing at that.
Well, and you see that,
sort of
you see that in the moment when clearly everything's gone off the rails, which, by the way, another bit of inspired casting. How great was it seeing Joaquin Phoenix portray what it's like to go on a talk show and not do the things you're supposed to do on a talk show? Having seen that Letterman clip from 10, 11 years ago, that was amazing. I went back and rewatched that Letterman clip, that ends with, him looking like he's on drugs the whole time, and Letterman saying, well, Joaquin, I'm sorry you couldn't be here tonight. All of that, it was like a bizarre mashup nightmare that I had, where it was elements of all these things I'd seen before, combined in ways I didn't expect, but that somehow, rhymed, as the cliche goes. It was remarkable. And by the way, I watched it with my 11-year-old daughter, and my favorite part of the whole thing was she's so in tune with stuff that that shocking moment of when because the whole movie, they're pretty sparse on blood and guts and some of the violence. Mm-hmm. You see, puncharoos and stuff and a couple of gunshot holes. But that full brain splattering moment, like I full body catalepsy, like, and then suddenly my daughter is in my arms or whatever. And then in this silent moment, I hear her mumble into my chest, like, I closed my eyes just in time. like she was so proud that she smelled it coming.
The thing, right? Like he is not a serial killer. He's not a mass murderer. I think a lot of people were expecting that, and it's not. He's a criminal. He kills very judiciously according to his own version of who should die and who should not. To your point about his illness, which I still would maintain, like, that his character works because that is the one thing that's real about him. You don't know what's real about him or not. I could be totally wrong. And in fact, the director has said, I'm going to leave it up to you to decide lots of things about this character. Does he kill his neighbor or doesn't he? We don't know. We're not shown. I choose to believe he didn't, because that would fit into who he chooses to let live and who he doesn't later on. Because she didn't do anything to him, like the little person that he lets go because, well, you were always nice to me. Now, this neighbor wasn't nice to him in reality, but in his head, maybe she was. But you could also make that argument the other way. It doesn't really matter. You're going to decide what you think of that, and it's going to change the movie. And that's what I wrote to you guys last night, is this movie is a clothesline. You can hang whatever laundry you want on it, because they very astutely created it so that it doesn't push one perspective or another, but gives you lots of openings to put your own interpretations and your own perspectives into it.
I think I only have 3 questions I want to ask you real quick. Number one, did it take anything away? Because I assume you had my same reaction. Pretty much from the first scene with the neighbor, I was like, okay, we're Fight Clubbing this. And it did not take anything away from me to recognize that early on.
I definitely expected it to be. The scene, I thought the scene in the elevator was real until he turned around and did this, and she laughed. I'm like, that doesn't seem likely.
It was kind of a withering laugh. So I was very
suspicious of it. And when she showed up at the hospital, I'm like, oh yeah, she's definitely not there. Like I was building a case in my mind for both sides of it throughout those relationship points. Because
for me, the moment was he's clearly bombing on stage, and then we push in to see her smiling and watching his set. Like okay, no.
No, absolutely not. Especially when he's bombing like that in a way that's going to end up, in the 1981 equivalent of a viral video.
Yeah. Well, and even that, man, that used to be your only fix that you could get. Okay, second question. The Wall Street jerks who bully him. I would bet solid money that it is no accident that the one in the middle, the ringleader of the bunch, looks an awful lot like Christian Bale. It looks like Batman, or certainly the stereotype or the archetype of Bruce Wayne as an adult. We are seeing some version of Bruce Wayne, or at least in the mind of our audience, to elicit sympathy, teasing and beating up the Joker.
Toilet Bug in the chat room agrees with you.
Okay, I'll take that.
I got nothing for you there. I didn't notice it at all in my viewing, and I don't really remember them well enough to say one way or another whether they strike me that way or not.
There were a number of moments that were like that I thought too good to be accidental. Another one of those is as we pan through Arkham, and you might imagine that the script would say, crazy people make crazy hand motions as if they're disturbed. But if you look at the hand motions, you're watching somebody have an imaginary conversation and rolls the dice like he's at a craps table, which is too on the nose to be an accident, given that he's portrayed as an agent of chaos, as unfair irrationality itself. Last question: how did you feel? Because the way I felt was like, God damn it, you couldn't resist, could you? You just couldn't resist. Just one more time of letting us know that Batman's parents were shot in a theater.
I had mixed feelings about that. I liked that Thomas. Yes, I did. I liked that Thomas Wayne was sort of set up as Arthur's villain, right? And again, unreliable narrator. We don't know if that's really the way Thomas Wayne is acting, but hey, it might be. Maybe Bruce Wayne's dad was a real jerk and an asshole, right? Like that's quite probable. I liked that. I didn't love that little Bruce was at the gate somehow when Joker showed up. But from the point of view of needing Arthur to be the guy that had threatened Thomas Wayne's son, I'm like, well, that's a good choice. And so I guess it has to be Bruce.
That actually works better if you unplug this movie from the DC universe. If you don't totally make that young Batman.
When it comes to the and now we're going to show them in an alley like every other time you've ever seen them, down to the pearls. Inexplicably why she's wearing them, we don't know, but they fall away, just like in every traditional Batman origin story you've ever seen. Part of me had the exact same reaction you did. It was like, really? You had to put this in here? On the other hand, though, if you are going to make this movie in the DC universe, a lot of people are going to be saying, well, so what about Batman? What happened with Thomas Wayne? I think you still could have gotten away without having that scene. But there was a part of me that wondered, and I'm like, well, now I know it wasn't Joker, because it was in my head, like, is he going to be the one to kill Bruce Wayne's parents? Because they did sort of point that way, and letting us know, no, he didn't. 20% of me thinks, okay, that's a good idea. 80% of me is cringing as well.
Keep in mind, I didn't hate it. I maybe gave a good-natured eye rolling of like, oh my God. In a world where
eye rolling is probably a better way.
In a world where it is a cliche and a trope to point out that they're constantly doing that scene and they can't resist it, to do it one more time, I thought was ridiculous.
Yeah.
But
and the point, I think it is nice to know, like, that wasn't Arthur. Arthur didn't do that. So, okay. Because, right. and I want to tie this into my thoughts about the ending. There's a lot of talk about like, well, did he imagine the whole story? Has he been in the asylum the whole time? Is that why we see him in the asylum at the end? And the director has also said, you decide. I left it in a way that you get to interpret this film the way you want. I think that he's not Joker that we will see Batman go up against.
Or maybe he's Joker 1.0.
Joker, because the one thing about Arthur in this depiction is he's not a criminal mastermind. They never show him being that smart about stuff. I could see him inspiring a mad genius to be like, oh, you know what? I'll be like Arthur Fleck. I'll be Arthur Fleck. In fact, I'll say I'm Arthur Fleck and become a criminal mastermind version of Joker. I could absolutely see that happening.
I totally believe that. Imagine Joker 1.0 is a one and done phenomenon that becomes the stuff of legend. The way we would talk nowadays about the Columbine shooting or whatever, and then decades after the fact, somebody. A villain would be inspired by that. That's crazy. In some ways, this felt like a what if, or I don't know. We talked about how I love how detached from consistency they are in this whole thing. It felt like telling yet another version of a story around a campfire. Yeah, we know the song, but I got my own twist on it, and for that I certainly applaud their adventurous spirit. And again, we talked about this on the main show. I totally understand anyone who says it was deeply unpleasant. They didn't like it. They didn't have fun. They dislike that it was disrespectful to the families of shooting victims. They dislike that it celebrates violence. All of those things I get, but just thinking it is bad, I need someone to explain to me that case, like poorly made.
I think a fair criticism is you don't tell people how they should feel about how they are treated. And in the wider world of the conversation we're having, this may not be the right time to tell a very realistic story about why someone becomes a murderer.
Yeah, I think it's very well put.
I was pleased that he wasn't a mass murderer. I was worried that at the end he was going to, invoke people to kill in his name. He didn't do either of those things. I think that was, given the context that this movie comes out, in a wise choice. I don't think it's wrong to tell a story about how a person could be driven to do evil things. In fact, you could make the argument that it's important to understand how a person could be driven to do evil things. And using Joker to tell that story is no different than using all kinds of other superheroes to tell other kinds of stories. It's not an illegitimate choice. But while those are legitimate choices in telling, I do understand where people might feel like, yeah, but we were talking about something this way right now, and this feels like the wrong time to bring that up. And I do get that reaction to it.
Yeah. Last thing, the box office receipts confirmed a theory I have, that a lot of people are aware of the uncomfortable nature of the story and the climate that we're in right now. And I think that a lot of people will not publicly say, like you and I have elected not to on Twitter. We're not chiming in really on this outside of, I just wrote, wow. But the box office receipts will speak for themselves, because I'm almost certainly going to see this movie again in the movie theater, because I'm certain there are things that I missed, and just visually and the performance and everything, it is a fascinating movie.
Yeah. And certainly the public debate around this is like all movies, going to be informed by your personal feelings, your personal emotions, and what you bring into it. And I'm not one who, and with Brian and I have gone around about this before, I'm not one who thinks there is an objective right or wrong answer about a movie. Ask opinions about a movie to a billion people, you'll get a billion answers. So, don't think that I'm not challenging anyone with my opinion, and I respect your right to have an entirely different opinion about it.
Yeah.
And we don't have to agree.
Yeah, I agree. We don't have to agree. Yeah.
We do agree, though, that you need to support us on Patreon, patreon.com/Cordkillers, which is the way to make sure that we keep having these shows. And we'll be back in 2 weeks to spoil you again.
Diamond Club hopes you have enjoyed this program.